we have Daisy Rockwell with us, and it's a real honor. So, Daisy, thank you so much. It's incredible that we actually have you here. We started with very humble beginnings, so having someone who's as accomplished as you is just fabulous. Daisy is an artist, writer, and a Hindi Urdu translator living in Vermont. She's translated numerous classic and contemporary literary works from Hindi and Urdu into English. I was telling her earlier, I've just finished 55 Pillars and Red Walls. That's by Usha Priyamvada. And I'm halfway through A Promised Land by Khadija Mastur, who's a Pakistani author. I guess both of these would go more into classics. And in the preamble of 55 Pillars, Red Walls, you've spent a lot of time talking about what is a classic. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
Her translations have been awarded the International Booker Prize, the Warwick Prize for Women in Translation. The Booker Prize, of course, all of us know, was for Tomb of Sand, Ret Samadhi. Also, the Emile Aldo and Jean Scaglione Prize for translation of a literary work, the Wisconsin Prize for Poetry in Translation. Her translations have been honored with funding from the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for Humanities, and Penn Translates. Trump is now doing some serious damage to the NEA, but I'm hoping that it survives, or at least a good part of it survives. Her novel Alice Sees Ghosts and Mixed Metaphors, her collection of poems about translation, are both forthcoming from Bloomsbury, India in 2025. Her memoir, Our Friend Art, is forthcoming from Pushkin Press in 2026. So welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me,
Daisy. We were talking earlier about origins and how did you land up, why Hindi and Urdu for someone with your background, and you said you're from the Massachusetts area. So how come this choice and this line of work, and how much of it was love and how much of it was a conscious decision that this is what I want to do?
Well, it's kind of all just random, in my opinion. I started to learn Hindi because I loved learning languages. I still love learning languages. I love grammar.
Right.
Some people like to learn languages because they want to chat in all different languages, but I love learning the grammar and the sort of inner workings.
And you're a master of like 7 or 8 of them, right?
Well, I don't know if I'm a master, but I had spent a lot of time learning French and Latin and some German and some ancient Greek, and I wanted to try something. I was in college and I just wanted to try something that I didn't know anything about at all. And because all these other languages are very connected. Of course, I didn't realize that technically Hindi is an Indo-European language. So it is connected. It's not like picking up Chinese or Arabic.
Right.
But it's still it's a very distant relative. So it was a challenge for me, and I really enjoyed the challenge. And I like to say is that I wandered into that introductory Hindi classroom and I never wandered out again because I'm still learning, and still, it's people. I know that a lot of Indians think that Hindi is very easy because it's, maybe it's easy if you're a native speaker, or it's easy to learn how to buy some vegetables or something like that. But reading Hindi literature is actually quite difficult because the Hindi authors like to bring in dialects and other languages and idioms, and like they're always experimenting with languages. There's a lot of words that are not in the dictionary, and if you don't know any Maithili, or you don't know any Punjabi, then you can't. It's very hard to figure out, especially translators have to nail down the meaning precisely. We can't just wing it the way that you can if you're a reader, casual reader. So yeah, so Hindi is very hard, and I still feel like I'm learning it.
Sorry, Hindi and Urdu are kind of very different, although the spoken words are the same, but the scripts are very different. The writing is very different.
Yeah. And then the high level vocabulary is completely different.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So if you have characters talking about philosophy or something,
Right.
then it would be barely recognizable as the same
Yes. Right.
language.
Right.
Mhm.
So Urdu, Hindi was just part of the same, fascination for languages from this part of the world. Or?
Yeah, I mean, and I've sort of dabbled in other languages like Malayalam and Tamil. I studied in college, and I've studied some Sanskrit. I studied some Arabic and some Persian to help me with my Urdu. So yeah, I think, and Sanskrit obviously helps with Hindi. So I'm always gathering more grammar and more
Hmm.
insight into language.
Wow. Okay. Great. And so from there, so what was your first translation? Was it something that you picked yourself? Was it someone who approached you? How did that come about?
Well, I think I was still in college when my teacher, my Hindi teacher, had us do a translation exercise, and it was a group of people. I think I was the only undergraduate, um, and he assigned each of us a text according to our level because we were kind of all at different levels, and some people were actually from India, that were doing PhDs in religious studies and things like that in Chicago. So we all got very different texts, and mine was probably the simplest one, and it was Mohan Rakesh's Andhere Band Kamre. And so I just translated the first page of that, and it felt there's something about it that felt right. I really enjoyed doing that, sort of going and untangling with the language, and then recreating it in English. It was fascinating to me, and um, then I ended up taking a seminar in my first year of graduate school with A.K. Ramanujan on translation, which was really an amazing experience. So at that time, I was working on a Hindi novel. It was very long, and I was completely in love with this novel. And I went through a lot of hardship with the copyright permission, and ultimately ended up abandoning that project, even though I
Right.
had translated 500 pages and like
Oh my
not in
God.
fine. Yes. um, but there were 500 more pages. So when you're a translator, that it's still better to cut your losses sometimes. And so that never came to fruition. And then my first published translations were of Upendranath Ashko, about whom I wrote my dissertation. And as I explain in my introduction to his short stories, Hats and
Mhm.
Doctors,
Mm.
um, I wanted to first translate his novel, but he was very elderly at the time, and he demanded that I do this collection of short stories first. And then he promptly passed away, so I felt obligated to carry out his wishes. Um, so that Hats and Doctors was my first published translation. It took me many years to publish it because nobody would take it in any country like India, US, UK. Nobody wanted it. And then I don't know, things changed so that I was trying to publish it in the late 90s, and then in 2011, um, just through a series of serendipitous exchanges, I ended up sending it to an editor at Penguin India, and I'd sent it there before, and they'd rejected it. But there was a new editor and like a new philosophy and a new approach for undertaking classics, Indian classics in
Mhm.
translation. So she accepted it. So even though I started, probably my first time of translating was, maybe 1990. I didn't actually publish anything until 2012.
Okay, great. And you mentioned that you also taught at Loyola. So are you
Yeah.
now a full-time translator, or do you also do other stuff on the side?
Well, I write and I'm an artist as well. And I also have a child, so that
Hmm.
is one of my projects. But she's 16, so that project is, coming towards completion.
All right, great. But you're not like holding down a job. You're just doing this, your own thing
No.
full time. All right.
And I mean, I always try to be open about funding, like how do
Mm-hmm.
you fund this exciting activity? And it is certainly not through selling my translations, because
Mm,
translation is not lucrative. So my husband is a psychiatrist,
okay.
and so he is the breadwinner, and he
Mm.
very kindly funds my shenanigans.
Well, your shenanigans won you a booker, so
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sure
right.
that's pretty awesome. Do
Yeah,
people
no, he's
do
tough behind it.
do people know the Booker Prize in the U.S.? I mean, it's the
I do, but it's not as big. I mean, pretty much everywhere else in the world, it's really big. It's sort of like cricket, like
yeah,
in the US, people know about cricket, but they don't really understand it, and
no,
everyone else in the world is playing it avidly. So, it's so yeah, the Booker people know about it here, and many people think it's impressive, um, but still, it's not the same as it is outside of this country.
sure, sure.
Literally everywhere else.
Right. So, when I was reading this book, I was telling you that I'm going through these couple of books of yours. But in Promised Land, especially, if since I know the language, when I'm reading some of the words, I can kind of guess what the English wordage the native verbiage must have been. So, like, there's a
Hmm.
sentence. There's of course, drink tea hot, hot, eat naan soft, soft, right? That's
Hmm.
going to
Yeah, right.
be piyo
That's
chai garam
easy.
garam, eat
Yeah, right.
Khao naan garam garam, right?
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
that's an easy one. But then there's another where it says her loneliness and recollections were as prickly as a co-wife, right? So that would probably be कि उसका अकेलापन और उसकी यादें एक सौतन की तरह चुभती थी, or something along those
Right.
lines,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Something
something
like that.
like that. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, when you're a translator and you realize that people who read, self-admittedly, I am not as good at Hindi, but I know the language. It
Hmm.
is my first, it is my mother tongue, but I'm more comfortable
Hmm.
reading in English. So when you
Hmm.
write, are you keeping in mind people who may be kind of bilingual, or are you mainly keeping in mind only people who are just writing, or know just the one language? Do you keep a market in mind at all? Is what
Oh,
is
yeah.
what I
So
want.
this is a great question. And,
Mhm.
just to start with, since everyone in this group is writing and starting out
Mhm.
writing,
Yeah.
audience is number one. You have to always be thinking about audience. And so when I started as a translator, I was under the misapprehension that my audience would be people that don't know anything, right?
Hmm.
Um, because why would the other people read it, right?
Yeah.
So like, and so people that don't know anything, or okay, that could be just like a random American person, but there could be a spectrum all the way to say, a South Indian who knows nothing about Punjab or something like that. So that's a spectrum of even there.
Right.
But what I came to learn as the more I translated was that my biggest audience is people like you.
Okay.
And so and it can also be, say, if it's a Hindi book, it could be an Urdu speaker who can't read the Hindi script. So a lot of my readers are like that, like cross-border readers. They can be diasporic, like that maybe aren't even literate in the language, but they still speak it. And as you say, like they can guess from the English what the Hindi might have been. And so I like to think of my audience now as like this huge tent, right? So it's like if you're throwing a wedding, and you have a massive tent, and endless buffet, and you're sort of trying to please everybody. So you've got
Okay.
vegan, and you've got gluten free, and you've got, you know, Jane, and you've got like heavy meat eaters and everything. So like, what are you gonna do? So I like over time I've slowly started to try to I can't please everybody, but I can imagine all those people under the tent together. If I can imagine that, then the literature, because part of my goal is to open this literature up to people who, for some reason or other, can't access it. Even like someone like you, who technically could access it, but it's like you're rusty, or
Yeah.
like you stop reading. A lot of people stop reading in class 10. I hear that over and over again. I stopped reading Hindi in class 10. And so I'm scared to pick up a Hindi book.
Yeah.
And so like when I did Tomb of Sand, I think Tomb of Sand is a special book because just the way that, is written in such an unusual style of Hindi. It's extremely unusual. And so it's a kind of translation where you can you have more insight into what the translator is doing. Like the seams are showing, right, of
Hmm.
what, because her language pushed me to do these kinds of things. So you understand also because as a booker, people started to read it side by side with the Hindi because they got excited about the book and about the prize. And I've heard from many, many people who have done this kind of side by side reading, or like their mom reads the Hindi and they read the English and they compare. And so that really excites me because, I also want to invite people to come back, like to try coming back into Hindi, because there's a sort of this fear and like, why don't you give it a try? Like you could do it,
Sure.
especially if you have a translation next to you. So that's a very long answer to your question, but I think about audience all the time.
Hmm. Very interesting. I hadn't thought that you would be keeping bilingual or people who are already familiar with the language as a potential audience. But you're saying that a lot of people like us would land up reading the translated work.
Well, you're the majority.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, so
Fascinating.
I have to think of you.
Cool. Next question was, I was wondering, and I'm guessing that because there's a lot of wannabe translators, people who are starting off thinking about becoming translators in this group,
Mhm.
what is your advice for people who want to get started
In translation?
as translators?
Yeah.
And you say you're also an independent writer in your own right. So actually, before
Mhm.
we get into the how to get started as a translator, because I think our group here is again going to be kind of both. There'll be many sitting in both the kind of
Mhm.
interested in both areas. Uh,
Right.
what do you suggest? Is there one place which is better to start? What do you think they should do? Where do you think they should kind of get going first?
I mean, I guess first of all, I recommend doing things in bite-sized pieces, because if you undertake to write an epic novel or translate an epic novel, you could get discouraged quickly because it will seem too overwhelming and too difficult. And um, writing is like a habit. It's sort of like an exercise routine. It's something that you should be writing or translating every day in order to achieve whatever your goal is, even if your goal is just to write. So you can't lie around waiting for the muse to visit you or something like that. You have to just sit down and do it, even if you have no plan. So, you can always try automatic writing, like where you just sit down and write whatever pops into your head, or write down a dream that you had. I was given advice for fiction writing that when you're working on a fiction project, it's really good to get up earlier than you usually do. Like, say, if you usually get up at 7, get up at 5 and then write for an hour. And, and to me, it might sound a little bit mystical, but, being able to create a piece of writing is like partly having access to your unconscious mind. So if you've just woken up and you haven't even gone through all your little rituals like bathing and stuff like that, then you still have more access to your unconscious mind, and you can kind of let things flow. So that's some advice. And then for translation, if you want to start translating, I recommend translating something very little, like not something long and difficult. So like whether it's a poem or a very short story or something like that, try something very little and then focus. What to me is most important with translation, and this is something that people don't realize, is that you have to do many, many drafts. Okay, so I've noticed a lot of people when they come to me for workshops and they're emerging translators, they think like 3 drafts is the absolute top. And I always say no, 10. And, Arunava Singha laughs at me because he obviously wouldn't have translated like 100 books if he was doing 10 drafts. But I do 10 drafts because I feel like it takes me that long to bring, to kind of like polish. So like you start with something ultra rough, you just sort of literally throw the words down on the page, and each time you go over it, and I don't mean like when I say a draft, I mean just go over it once, just rewrite it once, edit it once, then save that and go on to the next draft. Each time you do it, the text comes more into sight. So it's like you're polishing something and its beauty slowly starts to come through. So I recommend and oh, guess so that's the other thing is people often ask me like what do you mean by 10 drafts? What are you doing? And so one thing you can do is like rearrange the words. So a lot of times we get stuck in this one sentence, like say you translated one sentence and you put it down on the page from you had Hindi and you put it down in English. Then you read it and then you get stuck there like that. That's always going to be the sentence, but it doesn't have to be the sentence. There's actually like numerous ways you could rearrange those words. You could choose different words. You could have a one-to-one correspondence between the Hindi and the English words, or you could like rephrase it. You could do it blind. You could remember what was happening in that sentence and write that down in English, and that would be another way to reimagine that sentence. So what's really important for a translator is to think of the language as supple and to constantly rework it. And that's why 10 drafts is important to me.
Wow. Okay, great. So start small, multiple drafts. And if you're thinking of writing fiction, then you suggested early in the morning. So the early morning thing is not so important for translators, or does it work there as well?
No, what I love about translation and why I translate so much these days is because as a parent, I'm driving my daughter all over the place and, we're like waiting for her during dance class and that kind of thing. So translation is something that you can do at any time and you can just carry it around with you. And I know that Arunava does this too, that you can kind of squeeze translation into little spaces because you don't need to be inspired, but you need to keep working, So you have to keep working at a steady pace or you'll never finish it. If you're going to do a 200-page novel, how many pages can you do a day? Like to me, it depends on the writing. Like if it's very simple writing, maybe I could do 3 pages a day. But then after that, you have to do all these drafts and everything like that. So if you don't do it every day and you don't squeeze it into little pieces of time that you have, then it'll take you years to do a 200-page novel. But if, say, you can do 2 pages a day, that's 100 days. So, that's like a period of 3 to 4 months, and then to give yourself 2 months for editing it and reworking it. So that technically you could probably finish that novel in 6 months if you work every day, like say 2 hours. But those 2 hours can be all broken up, unlike
Okay.
writing fiction where you need to be in your zone.
Mm. So you probably read about the Booker Prize for this year. It went
Yes.
to. So do you know those folks?
I've met Deepa
You've
before
met Deepa.
briefly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's really exciting for all of us to have
Yes.
two bookers, two Indian bookers. Now those those Western publishers are gonna have to start, mending their ways and accepting more of our translations.
Yeah, we were all, of course, thrilled, but it becomes a very nationalist thing. But I feel
Yeah,
happier that it's more languages and more literatures which are getting recognized more than it being just India. Because otherwise, the world
yeah.
has been, English centric for so long that it's now
Oh,
great
yeah, it's
that we have
terrible.
this recognition that many other languages, many other writers, and many other languages are writing great stuff. So it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful.